Hello and welcome to session 3 of Master Series. It's great to have you back. We've got a lot to cover off today as is typical of these sessions. So first of all, we're going to start off with looking at the personal CFO model, how you can incorporate this model into your business, or in fact, how you can become a specialist within this model. Secondly, we're going to look at investment planning, how you can simplify it for your clients, how you can simplify it for your prospects, but importantly, how you can simplify it for yourself and how you can go to market with it simplified. And finally, we're going to talk about how you grow your business through referrals. And here specifically, we're going to talk about the conscious referability process. So as hopefully you recall from our last session, we started off with the confident mindset. And we talked about how the top advisors, the top producing advisors, have a mindset unlike most average level financial advisors, in that mentally they're always at the top of their game. And the reasons are about fourfold. First of all, they've got a growth mindset. They are students of the business. They know how to study, they know what to study, and they continuously study what they need to do to keep getting better in the business. Secondly, we talked about their motivation, how they're able to harness their motivation, how they can help motivate, but also inspire others to take actions, how they can bring the emotions into the actual act of motivating, inspiring. We talked about their ability to goal set, not just for their clients, but for themselves and for their business. Talked about that whole concept of begin with the end in mind, go out, take the picture of where you want to be, visualize it, and then take action to get working towards that end in mind. And finally, we discussed how grit works, that passion and perseverance for long-term goals that all great advisors have. The beauty of the confident mindset, all aspects of the confident mindset, is that it is very learnable. So we've all got the opportunity to grow along with the top producing advisors. Secondly, we talked about tax planning in financial advice, how you don't have to be the tax expert by any means. You just have to have a general understanding of good tax planning. We talked about the tax planning portfolio and how you can use that to go to market while you're prospecting as well, and how you can in fact use that with your clients to do good financial planning. Again, you don't have to be the expert. You just have to sound like you're the expert, but you're going to be backed up by your internal and external experts. So let's get into the confident business structure, and let's take a look at the personal CFO model that really resonates now with consumers, despite the fact that they won't recognize the title necessarily. But as Accenture's Global Financial Services Consumer Study shows, and many other studies have shown similar results, but this is now globally accepted, that actual consumers are looking for individuals who can help them in all aspects of their financial planning. They want integrated propositions, they want tailored offerings, they want it seamless. And in fact, they don't want to be involved in bringing the team, as it were, together. They want somebody else to run the show for them, and that someone needs to be you, because if it's not you, it's going to be your competition. And that's where the personal CFO model really resonates and rises above the cream. It really does do so much more than the average financial advisor is doing right now. One of the best concept pieces you can use and that you can actually use to market yourself is the concept of you Inc., you incorporated. This comes from Moshe Milevsky. Moshe is a finance professor at the Shuluk School of Business. And a few years ago, he wrote a book, Are You a Stock or a Bond? And in the book, he posited the idea of you Inc., you incorporated. And he said, Canadians really need to treat themselves more like corporations when it comes to running their personal finances. You know, corporations are effective, they're efficient. And if we would just operate more like corporations do, we could do so much better. As he says, you know, you Inc. is a small, tightly controlled, privately held company, whether it's individual or a couple or a family, you know, with the bulk of its productive assets invested in non-traded units of your future salary and wages. Here he's talking about your human, or at least your clients and your prospects, human capital, their ability to earn. He says your objective You Inc. as CEO, Chief Executive Officer, Chief Financial Officer, and Chairman of the Board is to maximize shareholder value of You Inc. while minimizing the financial risks faced by the corporation You Inc. The suggestion of using this is multifaceted, but number one, you are using the concept that people can really get their heads around, and you're using a third party, very credible individual in Moshe Milevsky, who is the most written academic in the world on personal finance. So when you use that kind of support to back where you're going, and in fact, where you're bringing your prospects and your clients up to, it gives you credibility. You're able to borrow that credibility from Moshe Milevsky. The one thing I would take umbrance with is the fact that most individuals cannot act as their own chief financial officers. They don't have the time, they don't have the expertise, and certainly they don't have the inclination to do so. And as the studies show, they want somebody who'll take that role and take on all aspects of that personal CFO. So if we understand this and we buy into the concept and we can get others to buy into it, we place our prospects and our clients in that CEO role, running their own You Inc. And then you take that position as their personal chief financial officer. You, in fact, act as the conduit to all the primary sources that they require for their finances, their lawyers, accountants, money managers, insurance specialists, lenders. And in fact, you may be licensed in 1, 2, or even 3 of these aspects, but you will require both internal experts to your corporations, external experts. But the idea here is that you can always bring that expertise. And when you look at all the different expertise areas within each one of these elements, you can recognize, obviously, but most consumers don't think about it this way, that there is just far too many specialties for any one individual to actually know it all. But the important thing is you will have the connections to these individuals, and you'll be able to get that information quite often at no cost. A great quote that I love to use came from an advisor, Paul, in Ottawa. I heard him use this many, many years ago, and he told us that, after closing a new prospect, turning them into a client, he would always say, just listen, John, listen, Mary, if it's got a $ in front of it, give me a call. In other words, what Paul was saying was anything that you are concerned about or have questions about when it comes to money and you, just call me. I'll get you the answer. And the reality is so many advisors, especially newer advisors, and when I say new, you could be upwards of 5 years and you still don't have all the knowledge that crosses all these different genres, as it were. And it gives you a lack of credibility because you don't have the confidence to talk about these things and you're always worried about the questions. But when you got this in mind, if it's got a $ in front of it, give me a call. Just as Paul would suggest, when somebody does come up with a question you can't answer, don't worry about answering it. Just come back with, great question, John. Never heard that one before, but I'll get you the answer within 24, 48 hours, whatever time frame you're going to use. And then you can go to those internal or external experts and get that information for them. So again, we don't have to be, nor do we want to even pretend to be the experts in all things. And even the research shows that the consumer does not believe a financial advisor has the capacity, the capabilities to know all of this. They just want to ensure that we know the people that know all of this, and we're going to be the ones that integrate all of this with their financial planning. So accepting that fact that we can help them in anything to do with financial advisory, we can now move on to the technical side. And what we're going to talk about, again, last session, we talked about the tax planning methodology. Now we're getting into the investment planning. And as we talked in our first session about life challenges, when it comes to the investment side, where we really are challenged with prospects and with clients is in their dereliction or their folly, their foolishness, and their beliefs that they can do it themselves, or in fact that they're so risk averse that they're doing nothing, which is a huge challenge to actually succeeding at financial goals. And secondly, so many of them procrastinate, they delay, they just don't get down to it. And they're starting too late. And in some instances, not starting at all to invest the way they need to invest to achieve those financial goals. What we do know, and this flies in the face of most do-it-yourselfers, but the evidence is unequivocal. The reality is the value of advice has been empirically researched, and it has shown year after year that those individuals or families that use professional financial advisors do significantly better than those that don't. And as this study suggests, after 15 years working with a financial advisor, the consumer will have upwards of 3 times the amount of assets that someone who's trying to do it on their own or not doing anything at all. So again, this is empirical research. It's been done time and time again. It's unequivocal. You just can't argue against it. Then on the procrastination side, and I'm sure most of you have seen these types of charts where, the longer you wait, the more it's going to cost you to get to where you need to be, whether it's in paying off your mortgage, educating your children, building assets for your retirement. If you're not doing it sooner, the later is going to cost you. And in fact, in a lot of instances, it just becomes impossible to achieve. So if we're going to look at how we can take investment planning and really start to grow our businesses, we want to go back to the concept of disturb and motivate and actually prospect with this disturb and motivate questions. And in my mind, this is one of the best ways to get conversations going to the point where somebody is going to be willing to sit down with you, either for a full meeting where you're doing a total discovery, or in fact, just a 20-minute coffee meeting, whether it's virtual or face-to-face, but they're going to talk to you at some future point so that you can show them what you might be able to help them with. So if we start off with, and this is one of the ones I enjoy the most, if at any time somebody's talking to you, they know what you do and they're talking to you about investments or certain specific goals, and the one that really resonates with me because it happens so often to me, but maybe it happens to you, you're meeting with someone and they push their portfolio statements under your nose. One of the best things you can do, rather than trying to judge it or critique it or make recommendations on it right away, is just look at it and just say, what's it for? And if, let's say it's a portfolio of RRSPs, they're going to say, well, it's for retirement, obviously. And you can say, okay, great, retirement, RRSPs, retirement, certainly. Obviously, nowadays, you could use RRSPs for the first-time home buyers plan. You can use them for the lifelong learning plan. But certainly, a lot of my clients do use RRSPs for retirement planning. So let me ask you, how much do you actually need by retirement, and what rate of return will it require to get there? And once you ask these disturb and motivate questions, again, like we talked last sessions, you just got to sit back, shut up, and let them process your questions. The reality is, even if they've got an advisor and the advisor has given them those numbers, which I would suggest is a rarity, in reality, they won't remember them. Again, this could be a face-to-face where you're sitting down with a prospect, or you could be just chatting with someone who's brought up something about savings, something about investments, or in fact, specific goals. And you can still ask, well, how much will that require? How much do you need? And what rate of return? They won't be able to tell you. And we're going to go a little deeper in this when we get into the investments, really get into it. Another one I really, really like using, and you can use this with virtually anyone because virtually everyone has debt. Just a simple question when it's appropriate. Has anyone ever shown you how debt swap works? And there's very little doubt they're going to say, what's a debt swap? And you're going to get to say, well, it's a way of turning non-deductible debt into tax-deductible debt. Probably don't have the time to show you how it works right now, but if you want, what we could do is set a time for next week, and I can see if you even qualify for it. What's better for you, daytimes or evenings? If they say daytime, what's better, mornings or afternoons? So lock them into a time, again, whether it's a 20-minute coffee meeting or a full discovery meeting, but book them into it. And then you've got the opportunity not just to talk about debt swap, but talk about a lot more opportunity to help them. Has anyone ever shown you how diversification of strategies work? Just as we looked at our last session with the tax planning within the diversification of strategies, they're probably going to say, yeah, don't hold all your eggs in one basket. Yeah, I've heard, no. That's diversification of assets. Has anybody shown you how diversification of strategies work? They'll say, well, what's that mean? Well, it means you don't need to use just one strategy, not even just two strategies. It's looking at how you minimize risk and optimize opportunities with whatever financial goal you're looking to achieve by having a diversification of strategies. Probably not the time to talk about it or get too in deep about it now. But if you want, what we could do is set a time next week. What's better for you, daytime or evenings? Right, and take it from there. Has anyone ever shown you how an individual pension plan works? Well, this would only be useful primarily for individuals who have corporations in place. But again, most people have never heard of an IPP. Has anyone ever shown you how to build your own tax shelter? What do you mean? No, I don't know. What's that mean? Well, there are prepackaged tax shelters, tend to be high risk, but the government does give you benefits, limited partnerships, flow through shares, things like that. But a couple of finance professors out of York University actually recommend, if in fact you're higher income, higher tax bracket, if you're used to being involved in the markets and such, and if it makes sense specifically for you, rather than buying prepackaged tax shelters, you should build your own. And they'll say, well, how do you do that? And, well, probably not the best time to do it right now, but if you'd like, what we could do is set a time next week and so on. And then that's what you constantly look to do. Just have these questions ready. So when you are speaking to someone who does fit your ideal client profile, you can pick out the right disturb and motivate question just to get them talking and then to book that initial meeting. Now, when we get specifically into investment planning, when someone says, you know what, I've already got a broker, an investment advisor, because I know you've all heard that before. It's the first objection that they usually get to. And once again, much like tax planning, when they say, I've already got an accountant, the last thing you want to do is argue against it. You want to get on their side to say, that's great. Most people don't use experts enough. Can you tell me something about your investment planning process? Yet again, shut up after you've asked the question, and they're not going to be able to answer it fully by any means, if at all. And then you can say, okay, well, with all of my clients, I start by, and then you just go into the investment planning process wedge, where you're looking to wedge out their incumbent, their current advisor, and replace that advisor with you. And the whole concept of the wedge comes from an advisor out of Texas by the name of Randy Schwantz. What he's suggesting is that you put up the perfect picture of what it is you do to the point where you know that your competition, their current advisor, can't match that image. The last thing we ever want to do is badmouth their advisors, because if you start badmouthing their advisors, in reality, what you're doing is badmouthing them. They selected their advisor. You badmouth them or you badmouth their advisors, you are badmouthing them, and we don't do that. So we want to put up the perfect picture. We start the wedge by showing that perfect picture. So what I do with all my clients is, first of all, we quantify the financial goal, what it is you're looking to achieve. We've got to put time and money to it, because mathematically, once I know when you need the goal accomplished by and how much money it's going to cost, I can figure out anything, rates of return and such, and taking taxation into consideration. Reality is, most advisors don't even understand that you can quantify a financial goal once you have time and money in place. Mathematically, we can figure out exactly what it is you have to do. Then I'll go through a personal investment policy statement to make sure that you're comfortable with everything that you need to do to achieve those goals. That's going to help us set the asset allocation, which will be based on the rate of return you need to get your financial goal. We're going to implement tax efficient allocation so that you're actually, in some instances, using before tax dollars rather than after tax dollars. And then on a regular basis, we're just going to monitor and review what's happening with your investments. If you're on course, great. If you're beyond where you need to be, super. If in fact you're not where you need to be and we have to do anything else to get back, we'll take a look at it at that point. That's what I do with all of my clients. But maybe that's not important to you. And again, 95% of the time, probably higher, that I've said maybe that's not important to you, they're going to say, well, no, that is important to me. And the moment they say that, you say, oh, okay, well, why don't we set a time to get together? Looking at next week, what's better for you, daytimes or evenings? If it's daytimes, morning, afternoons, right? And just nail them down for that. But this is one of the easiest ways, these open-ended questions, giving the wedge, showing them the perfect picture of what you do with them thinking in comparison to what they're getting from their current advisor, gives you the opportunity to get in the door and again, show them that perfect picture of great financial advice. The next thing we have to understand is, and again, research shows consumers want to be educated. While they do want that personal CFO to take over and run the show for them, with them in charge, they still want to be educated. So hopefully many of you are using a personal investment policy statement. If you're not, I would strongly recommend it, but most I would suggest, probably because of the push with compliance, you are, but just looking at all of their risks, all of their comforts, what you will be doing with them to build out their portfolios. Here's one of the ones, that second last evaluation benchmarks. So many consumers think that they have to judge their investments against some benchmark like the Standard & Poor's TSX 500, whatever it is. If you can get their minds off of the different indices and move them on to their goals. If you say you need a 6.5% rate of return over the next 20 years, here's the portfolio that should do it. Keep them focused on the rate of return they need. Ignore the other benchmarks because that's got nothing to do with what they need to achieve, and you keep bringing them back to that. Likewise, you want to talk and educate them. Again, when I say educate, it's almost at a minimal level, but you can allow them to open up for questions, but you want to talk about different risk management within their portfolios, all of the different risks, and why you would structure a portfolio to mitigate these risks for them. But education is critical. One of the best strategies or concept pieces I used as an advisor was back when it was just an index chart, now a Morningstar index chart, gives us all of this historical information, which is fantastic, because if there's one thing investors tend not to understand, it is the historical rates of return that the different indices, the different asset classes have provided over historical timeframes. And the index chart gives us these. But if you just leave it at this, it's okay, you're educating them a bit. But what I found unbelievably useful was to show them way beyond just these rates of return that historically have been done, but take them and educate them to the concept of after-tax real rates of return, or in fact, after-tax, after inflation rates of return, because this is what they're using for purchasing power. Those gross rates of returns mean nothing in reality to them. And I can assure you, virtually no advisors are doing this at this point. This is the means of getting the after-tax real rate of return. You can do this on a calculator. You can do it on your software, obviously. But when we compare the rates of return to after-tax real rates of return, what we can really show them, and here I'm doing this at a 40% average tax rate, what we can really show them is what their purchasing power is going to be, and why they have to look at the different asset classes, and why they have to be more thoughtful, and in fact, why they need you to help them, because this comes down to things they didn't know that they didn't know. They knew they didn't know anything about historical rates of return of different indices. What they didn't even know they didn't know was that you could actually look at the after-tax, after inflation rates of return, because this is everything to do with purchasing power. I actually used to just pick out three. I would use the US stocks, the Canadian stocks, and then the bond index, or even the T-bills. I would memorize the three. And then I would do it in front of them. I would always pick actually a 50% average tax rate because it was just easier to do without a calculator even, and I would figure out in front of them their after-tax, after inflation rate. And then I would take the two, the before tax, before inflation, and the after tax, and I would compare. I would say, okay, if you had 10,000, or depending on how many assets they had, 100,000. In this instance, if we look at the U.S. small stocks, I would show future value after 10 or 20 years at 13.2%, and then compare it at 6.82% and show the dramatic difference. But what really makes the difference is when I do it against equities versus fixed income. So do it against the bond. So where the bond came in at, what we're not getting nowadays, obviously, but long-term 7.5%. When you're after tax, after inflation in a non-registered account, 0.96, you've got virtually no growth. Or if you're looking at T-bills, went from a 5.1 down to a negative 0.42, your 100,000 is not just not growing, it's actually devaluating. And people don't have a clue because they don't know what they don't know. And you're the one bringing them this information, not their current advisor. You are educating them to reality. And this is how you can shake them up. You're showing them, again, the perfect picture. You understand the markets. You understand historical norms. You're educating them to this. Likewise, you can talk about bull and bear markets. If we look at the TSX, the average bear market, down 27%, has gone on for about 9 months. Yes, this doesn't seem like a very long time. 27%, that's a big enough. And you've got to put it in perspective, usually in dollar terms. If you had 100,000 invested, it's now down 27,000. And 9 months, despite the fact that it doesn't seem that long, when you're in those 9 months, it seems like eternity. And you've got to make them aware of this. And here's the thing. You've got to constantly remind them of this stuff. You can't just tell them once and then leave it, because when the markets go down, and I know many of you have seen clients go through this, but it's been a long time since it's happened. So we've got the bear markets of down 27% for 9 months. Standard & Poor's 500 down 26, but 13 months long, compared to the growth side, our bull markets of 131% on the upside, going on for over 4 years. And with the Standard & Poor's 500, 150% up for 55 months. But again, constantly going back to the bear market to reiterate, these will hit. It used to be every 4 to 5 years. We've had a long run in this bull market, but markets always go down, and they go down, and they can be painful. They go back up, and it'll be a long run. But we don't ignore either of them. And you've all seen this type of study that shows here's where we can fight against market timing, and especially with the do-it-yourselfers, because most of them in reality just lie about what they achieve. Because again, as all of you have seen in the past, you just miss some of the best days, and you're shaving most of the growth off what you could have had you just stayed invested. Likewise, having portfolios, as this from Fidelity shows, conservative versus balanced versus aggressive. You take the average annual return, 5.9 versus 7.9 versus 8.9. And what we want to do is say, this is the rate of return you need to achieve your goals. And hopefully you've figured that out for them, because if you don't, your competition will. But if we can then set them up, this is the type of portfolio you probably want to be in to achieve that. At least that's what's happened in the past. And that's the only guide we have in reality. So have something that, again, educates them to why you use certain portfolios based on the rates of return they need to achieve. And we looked at this in fact, in our first session. You can remind them that, yes, the markets go down, the markets go up, but historically, long-term, it's a constant upgrading in the markets, despite all of the commotion we've had year after year, forever. So you've got to give them that optimism. From investment planning, we can then move over to asset management, which really means we're going to take everything as far as savings and investing into consideration so that we can actually do the planning for them. And our two primary objectives when it comes to asset management: diversify assets. Yes, don't put all your eggs in one basket. But then again, as we saw last session, diversify your strategies. So don't put all your strategic moves in one basket either. Look at multiplying your strategies wherever possible. So when we talk about asset management, our portfolio, we look at a short-term reserve. If there was one thing that COVID showed us, despite all the reports for years before COVID, was that, Canadians were $200 away from bankruptcy if they didn't have a paycheck, for any time. We just haven't done the right job as an industry, and certainly the consumers have not done the right job in building up their short-term reserve. So we would suggest that you, Mr. and Ms. Consumer, have at least 3 to 6 months worth of expenditures on hand, so that if any emergencies or plagues happen along, you've got cash on hand that you can take care of 3 to 6 months worth of expenditures. And certainly, the wealthy don't need to do this because they have long-term assets that they can use as collateral. They've got lines of credit that they can always tap into. So for those that aren't there yet, we've got to build up some cash reserves, but we're going to show you what the wealthy do by building long-term for collateral, by having lines of credit as well in place where necessary. Then we're going to talk about registered pension plans for incorporated individuals, IPPs. However, the reality is less than 30% of workers nowadays actually have a registered pension plan. So ask them if they do. If they don't, then you're reliant for the most part for your retirement planning on the RRSPs. Came about in 1957. Great method of income and tax deferral. Certainly a great opportunity to save now while you're usually in your higher tax bracket for retirement when you should be dropping down. And that's the deferral. The one thing I suggest to all my clients is just don't die with them. And that's going to be a bit of a shock for them to hear. They probably haven't heard that before. You can just say, the one thing that we know about RRSPs, they were brought in so that we could defer into lower tax years so that we could save for our own retirement. But what we've actually found, retirees in this country don't spend all of their money. In fact, many of them, especially the wealthier, die with a lot of registered money. And when that happens, you tend to push yourself up to even a higher tax bracket, higher than you ever got a refund for while you were accumulating into the RSP. So that's flipped it on its head, and it doesn't make sense. So we don't just plan for saving into RSPs now and reducing taxes. We have to plan for when you're retired and look at, do we actually do what, or unlike what the government, the media, and even our own industry says, is let's not just defer blindly. What we're going to do is plan this out on a regular basis, on an ongoing basis, year by year while you're in retirement. We're going to do this thoughtfully. The next is the TFSA, which in my estimation is probably one of the best opportunities the government ever gave us for long-term saving and investing. Most Canadians don't understand the value. They haven't seen it in numbers, but this came around in 2009, started with $5,000 a year that someone over the age of 18 could start investing into TFSAs. Huge opportunity to have non-tax dollars in the future, and a huge opportunity for virtually every goal, whether it's educating your kids, buying a cottage or rental property, down to retirement itself. TFSAs are phenomenal. If in fact you've got cash beyond your RSP limits and your TFSAs, then you've got the non-registered, your regular savings and investments that are fully taxable. Your interest is taxed at 100%, capital gains at a 50% inclusion rate. Dividend producing investments, when you're getting dividends from public corporations, you're being taxed at about a 75% rate at your marginal tax bracket. So we want to use those tax efficiently if you are investing in non-registered assets. And finally, we've got these specialized areas that we can invest in that the government has allowed us, such as registered education savings plan, registered disability savings plans. They can be quite complex, quite convoluted, but they have benefits when appropriately used. So what we want to do is look at what makes sense to you. Not everybody should be in our RRSPs. Not everybody should be in non-registered investments. It just depends on your personal situation and most specifically, your personal goals. So then we can move on to suggest how we look at what it is they need to do. And again, as our last session showed, you could go right into the diversification of strategies and show them how, against all the different tax backdrops of their personal situation, what might make sense. Does it make sense to have everything in our RRSPs for retirement, or should they diversify out of that? And in fact, there's a lot of Canadians that probably should cap the amount of money they put into RRSPs and then switch over to TFSAs, non-registered, and in the rare occasion that it makes sense, building their own tax shelters through an investment loan. So making it easy and putting it all together. We looked last session at our tax planning portfolio, and we just looked at the asset management portfolio and how these two really do come together, and we play off with the asset management all of the different tax opportunities, and very many of those 40 plus tax efficient strategies fall right into the asset management camp. So they're very, very interrelated. Next session, we're going to be talking about debt management and how we can bring that into play, because as I said earlier, most Canadians do have levels of debt way beyond what they would ever have imagined, than what most are comfortable with, and what can bring down personal finances very quickly, unfortunately. And then we also are going to be looking at the risk management side and mitigating that. But all four of these areas, again, nobody will have seen this that you're talking to as a concept piece. They won't understand or haven't even thought. Again, they don't know what they don't know. But you bring these four together by just drawing it out in front of them. Yes, you can use a slide like this, but it's so powerful when you can memorize these and draw it out in front of their very eyes and talk to it. It's very much like an architect could draw you a house almost to scale without any other tools but a piece of paper and a pen, and you'll be amazed at what they can draft out for you in front of you. That's what you want to get to. So moving on from our technical side, let's start looking at how you grow your business, the way top advisors do grow their business. We're going to very quickly go through business strategy and marketing planning. The reason we're going to do it so quickly is that it can get very in-depth. You can go to my book, The Financial Advisor's Guide to Excellence, for more in-depth. I'm not suggesting this is short shrift in this area, but because of the depth, it takes a while to actually go into it. What you can do immediately is get into the prospecting dashboard, which we are going to do starting this session. So I just want to very quickly go through strategic planning when it comes to your business. First of all, understanding what your business vision is. It's, again, goal setting, understanding what at the end of the day, and it comes back to that proverbial individual situation, what would you want others to say about you, write about you, think about you, on the day of your funeral? Is very much the same thing as a business vision. How do you want your business, and you as the individual running that business, how do you want that to be seen? What do you want to see as a business at the end of the day? Then we move on to backcasting, and it's somewhat similar to that. You take yourself to the future, look at the big picture, and then start working backwards so that you can move forward with strategies to actually achieve that business vision. Environmental scanning is looking at all of your competition, whether they work for the same firm or external firms, but what do they look like in comparison to you? What can you borrow from them? What would you do that could be better than what they're doing? And really understanding what the environment of a financial services business looks like. You put your strategies in place, you start to formulate them and work them, and then implement them. And then on an ongoing basis, you're monitoring and evaluating. We move into the business strategy itself. And again, we've got this business vision. What is it that we want our business to look like? And we've got to start with our core values. This could be honesty, it could be integrity, whatever your core values. These are things that are immovable. Your values are usually with you, hopefully, if they're good values for life. And you want those same values to be with the business for the life of your business. Then you look at your core purpose, and this comes down significantly to having an ideal client in mind. Why are you doing what you're doing. What is the purpose of your business? Many of you right now are generalists to any type of individual, which is fine. You can build a business. But what we're suggesting is top financial advisors, top producers tend to focus on a cohort of individuals that they can do great work, not just good work, but absolutely great work. And they, at that instance, they've got a core purpose to work with, whether it's doctors, lawyers, business owners, young families, whatever it is, professionals, but they've got a core purpose. They believe, retirees should have a dignified retirement. They believe business owners are the engines of economic growth for the country. Whatever it is, they've got a core purpose to support those ideal clients. And then something that can change, the envisioned future, whereas our core values and our core purpose don't change. Our envisioned future, we can measure on a 5, 10, 15-year basis, and we start setting goals towards that envisioned future. Peter Drucker, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, many of you have read, has a suggestion on marketing. The aim of marketing is to know and understand the customer so well the product or service fits him and sells itself. Well, that would be fabulous if it was attainable. What I'm suggesting is it comes as close to being attainable when you decide who your ideal client is, because then your products or services can fit specifically to that individual or group of individuals. You're not trying to fit everybody, but more specifically, your products and service are going to fit one cohort, and you're going to be such an expert, not at just doing the work for them, but actually marketing and prospecting to those individuals as well. So when we look at a marketing planning process, first of all, you establish your marketing vision, right? How are you going to market yourself? Determine your market. Well, again, it's simple. If I've got an ideal client, one type of cohort, and again, doesn't mean that you can't work with people outside of the ideal client profile. It's just you don't market and prospect to others. You focus on. Certainly, my ideal client was retirees, and that's the only type of people I ever marketed and prospected to. I did take on their children, quite often their grandchildren. Periodically, I'd take on somebody that didn't fit the retirement mode, but it was a rarity because I wasn't marketing myself to them. Develop your unique value proposition. I've been writing a lot on LinkedIn about this recently. Far too many advisors give very short time to the UVP. The UVP is the primary marketing tool that we have. It is at the core of what we do, why we do it, who we do it for, how we do it, and what it is that the client gets from it. And when you really truly understand the value of a unique value proposition and you turn it into your own language, it becomes you, you become it. It is how you market your services, and it's how you communicate. You've got to determine your media. How are you going to get out to the marketplace? We can talk about word of mouth. This is, certainly centers of influence, getting referrals from clients, getting introductions from our clients or our circles of influence, anything of that nature. We could do public relations, as it were, through webinars and seminars, speaking engagements, writing. Certainly social media is the new poster child. Having said that, we really have to recognize that we don't have to spend the big bucks that are being asked the financial advisors for social media. We could work it ourselves. My suggestion is we can do most of our marketing and most of our prospecting at virtually no cost, and we can use social media to do so at little cost. And finally, like all of our processes, we've got to monitor and evaluate it. The one thing that I have absolute belief in, and many of you know of Frank Stronach, the founder of Magna Corporation, as he says, either you grow or you die. And he was talking about businesses in general, but there's no term truer to the financial services industry as this, because our clients literally do die. And even if you're not dealing with a lot of elderly clients, the odd younger client will pass away, but you will lose them to competition. You will lose them because they're just not happy with whatever the situation is. But if your business is not growing, it's dying. And the worst thing that I can imagine for a financial advisor is to grow their business to the point where they're looking at retirement and then they let off the gas and they start to see the equity that they've built up over the years and over the decades die, which is a crying shame because no other industry would allow that to happen. And it's an old way of thinking with older financial advisors. Hopefully, it's changing in our industry, but I still see it a lot, and it's very unfortunate. We build and we work too hard to let our equity in our businesses die. So moving on to actually how we prospect. And our belief here at Advice2Advisors is that marketing and prospecting are two separate entities that come together and work very well. But you have to recognize marketing is how we put ourselves out to the marketplace. Prospecting is where the rubber really hits the road. It's when you talk to individuals with the intent to get them to set a meeting with you, to sit down so you can show them what you can do for them. So with that in mind, we're going to start with, and these are the 4 methodologies that we've discerned as being the top methodologies of top producing financial advisors right across North America. So we're going to start off with conscious referability. And I'd like you to just think about your situation personally at this moment. When you think about yourself and how referable are you, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rank yourself? And I'd suggest just write it down. Are you getting all the referrals you want? Do you even know how many referrals you're getting? Are the referrals you're getting the type of referrals you want, or are they the type that you can't actually work with? Do your clients know who they should be referring to you? Do you have centers of influence that know who to refer to you? And when I say who, obviously we're talking about your ideal client profile. So if you're under, let's say, an 8, there's room for opportunity. If you're 9 and 10 on referrals, in other words, you're doing all your business through referrals and you're extremely happy with the amount of business you're writing through referrals, that's fabulous. You might have some room for improvement. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're so good at it. The one thing I would suggest, the vast majority of financial advisors aren't getting the amount of referrals they'd like to, and they cannot run their businesses to the level they want to purely on referrals. And it's interesting because I've heard hundreds, if not thousands, of senior advisors, they've been in the business for decades, saying, I do all my business through referrals. And that may or may not be true, but most of them aren't knocking it out of the park. So many top advisors do not leave themselves open to just referrals. They've got the other methodologies that they're constantly working, because there are times, especially when the markets are tumultuous, when things happen, that referrals do slow down and in some instances even dry up, like any method or methodology of prospecting. So the best of the best tend to have multiple means of going out to market. So another thing, when will you get referrals? There are so many things I've heard about. Okay, I'll get referrals once I've earned them, whatever that means. I'll get referrals from the great work I do. Well, how long does that take? I'll ask for referrals when the time is right. When's that? I'll get referrals because good things happen to good people, and I'm a good person. I'll get referrals when Saturn's 3rd moon aligns with the sun. It's all bull. The reality is you need to start referable. From the moment you meet someone, you should be setting yourself up to be referable. And I know a number of you out there have had someone, a potential prospect, maybe not even a prospect, maybe it's someone you just know, who has referred you, even though they're not your clients, because they just buy into you. They believe you're good at what you do. Maybe they've got an advisor that they can't leave, a family member, whatever it is, but they've referred you. I certainly remember probably the best one I've ever had in my career. I was probably in 6 years. I went out to see a couple, went through everything. Somehow the female partner said, my mom's a widow and my husband Frank's been doing her tax returns for years. And she told me some such. And I said, well, here's how it actually works. I was driving home from the appointment and I get a phone call, and Laura, the wife, said, would you talk to my mom? And I said, sure. But I'm in the car right now. And she said, could I give my mom your phone number? And I said, absolutely. Mom called me the next day and she became a fabulous client. Now, this couple were not retirees by any means. They were young professionals, but they were referred to me by a retiree. And then they referred me up to the mom who was a retiree. So things can happen that way. But you can start referable. And the way you start is on how you set yourself up. And if you set yourself up as a personal CFO, I assure you, it's a fabulous way to start referable. Now, the one thing I want to suggest, and I know many of you have heard it before, the age old, and certainly the way I was trained on how you get referrals was to ask that age old question, who do you know that could use my services? Well, what the research shows is, number one, you're making your clients uncomfortable because they don't know who you're looking for. They don't know much about the finances of their family members, their friends, their colleagues. They don't want to be involved. So they become uncomfortable. You feel that. You become uncomfortable. You've asked them some nebulous question, who do you know? And the response usually is something like, well, I can't think of anybody right now, but I'll get back to you. You leave the appointment, they leave the appointment, they're not going to get back to you. The next appointment, nothing's happened, and there's that discomfort. Now, caveat here, absolutely. There's some of you out there that ask for referrals, and you do a great job in getting them. In fact, some of you have grown your business. Super. If that's the reality, keep doing it. Definitely. But for the vast majority of financial advisors, like myself, tried it, didn't like it, stopped doing it, and then wondered, why am I not getting more referrals? Well, the reality is we do believe you should stop asking because everybody's uncomfortable with it, but you need to become consciously referable and use the science behind referability to actually get even more referrals and get them coming to you so that you don't have to ask. Now, number one way is, first of all, people have to like you to give you. They don't have to like you, but if you can create likability, the likelihood of you getting referrals is significantly higher. Robert Cialdini, who's a professor emeritus out of Arizona State, he's written a number of books. Well, his two primary books, Influence and Persuasion, I believe is the name. Fabulous books on how you create this likability, how you can engage people, how you can influence people, and influencing really brings itself into referability. First thing he says is you got to be physically attractive, which can be challenging for some of us, unfortunately. But as Cialdini suggests, one of the top ways to be physically attractive is just to smile. And as simple as that sounds, it's not that simple for most people. I can remember in university, I was a bartender. I loved being a bartender. I loved the speed of it. I loved working extremely hard. I loved it. But I remember a young woman coming up to me once and I'm working away. And she said, well, what's wrong with you, Dan? And I said, nothing. I'm busy. I'm loving it. She goes, you should tell your face that. And I couldn't, it was staggering. I couldn't believe she said that to me because I was loving at the moment how busy I was. But what I didn't realize was I probably looked glum. I was so focused on what I was doing. And that's the reality with most people. We don't smile as much. Some are great at it, but most of us don't. So smile. Likewise, dress appropriately. And appropriate depends on your situation. If you're on Bay Street, you're probably in a suit. If you're in the West, you're probably not. So it depends on your geographical location, who you're dealing with, but physically attractive does help in likability. Similarities sell. People like to work with people who are like them. And there's all different types of similarities. My dad was military. I wasn't. Most people think I was, but I wasn't. But I could talk military because of my dad. Plus, I studied history. So I had a cohort of retired military personnel. My wife is directly from Scotland, born in Edinburgh and lived her entire childhood and early adulthood in Edinburgh. So I ended up with a cohort of immigrants, Scottish immigrants that were retired or retiring, because I could speak about Scotland and Scottish life to them. So many of you have similarities. It could be your education, it could be your past professions, it could be your ethnicity, it could be your religion, whatever. Similarities sell. Give honest compliments. As you're going through discovery, or even as they're saying certain things, give honest compliments. If they've done a great job in reducing their debt, compliment them on it. If their portfolios are decently constructive or they've saved a lot of money, compliment them on it. If they've got their estate planning in order, compliment them on it. This is an easy one. Work towards common goals. That's what we do. The more we can help our clients with their goals, the more we're going to help ourselves with our goals. They don't know that necessarily, but the reality is when we do it with excitement, they will feel it. And finally, Martin Seligman, he's father of positive psychology out of the University of Pennsylvania, suggests active, constructive responding. In other words, ask great questions, shut up, listen, and then respond appropriately. Sometimes it's just a continuation of the conversation, but very often you want to reiterate what they've just said to make sure you've got it down. But that creates likability. We're going to be talking about how you highlight your unique value proposition so that it resonates with them and they see themselves within it. You've got to build trust, and everybody knows trust, but trust is a nebulous thing and people don't really know what it means. Dan Ariely, who's a professor of behavioral economics out of Duke University, has written on this. He says the first thing you've got to do with trust is build long-term relationships. Problem with that is we don't have a long-term to turn someone who's a prospect into a client. We want to do it quickly. So one of the ways that we found very useful is taking people into the future, talking about their goals, and then bringing them back into the current, partnering with them in the future. So it could be something, if they've said they want to retire, if they want to educate their kids, say, okay, well, then what we probably want to do, and here's where you start switching from you and I, and you partner and say, what we'd want to do, and we want to do this, and we want to do that, and then bring them back to the present and say, okay, so to get there, here's what we've got to do. So turn those short-term relationships mentally into long-term relationships so that they can actually see themselves with you in the future. This one goes without saying nowadays. Well, it should. Certainly, compliance has forced this on us, which is not a bad thing. Intentionality. This is the why. Why do you do what you do? And this is going to fall right into your unique value proposition. So this is going to be an easy one. Avoid asymmetrical relationships. As Ariely points out, people do not like their experts to have the upper hand on them. That's why they don't like lawyers, right? Because lawyers talk a different language. They know more. They know things that they can do to sue us. Doctors speak a different language, and financial advisors speak another language. We need to speak the same language. Likewise, they have to understand, and they don't like that fact that we have this knowledge that they don't have, and they don't like the fact that, in fact, it could get them into trouble. So what the research suggests is you make it very, and this goes into transparency, you make it very easy for them to get the upper hand. The suggestion is, listen, Bob and Sue, the one thing I want to let you know is that hopefully you can ask me any question about anything to do with your situation. If you ever think I'm not giving you the right answers, if you think I'm not doing the right thing for you, I would hope you could talk to me. But if you feel it's beyond that, here's the name of my branch manager. Here's his or her phone number. If that's not good enough, here's the CEO of our company. If that's not good enough, here's our regulators. That will bring that asymmetrical relationship to a very even keel, possibly even giving them the upper hand, and that's going to build trust. And again, back to common goals. Well, if we can show that we're excited enough to work with them on their goals, and we can do it passionately, we're going to get our goals, but they're going to see that we are working to achieve their goals. Next one is inspire. Talia Sherritt, who's a neuroscientist out of the University College London, wrote a great book called The Optimism Bias. In that, she said, people tend to be overly optimistic, and we overshoot our beliefs in comparison to reality. And what she says, we have to have a realistic or a moderate optimism that we can really work with so that we can work in reality. And, much as when I've shown you that chart, that historical chart from 1929 through to 2021, here's all the things negatively that happened year by year, yet the market still managed to climb their way out of it. Mankind always moves forward. We have downtimes, but we're constantly on the move to better ourselves. We need to be able to support what we say, understanding the market, the historical norms of the different indices, what the rate of returns are after tax, after inflation, those types of things. When we can be realistically optimistic and show our prospects and our clients why we are optimistic, we can inspire them. And the thing we want to inspire them towards is their financial goals. It's all about them. A great financial advisor said to me many, many years ago, and this really changed my thoughts on referability. He said, if you want your clients to refer you to you constantly, regularly, and without you asking, and Ian never asked for referrals, he said, you've got to make them look good when they refer to you. In other words, what he said was, that person that's referred to you, they need to go back to your client and say, John, thank you so much for referring me to Dan. He did exactly as you said. He did great work. I'm really looking forward to working with him in the future. I think every time I say this, I think of a mechanic I had many, many years ago. My first BMW, when it was beyond its 4 years and the warranty had expired, I was looking for a mechanic, and a friend of mine, Stuart, referred me to John of Super Auto Sport. He said he's fabulous and his costs are right in line. He doesn't overcharge. I went to John, found out exactly that. He was great. I loved working with him. I went back to Stuart and said, Stuart, John is fabulous. I referred John to more people than I've ever referred anyone else to any other type of service, just because it's a pretty common thing to do, to the point where, and all these people would come back to me and say, thanks for referring me to John, to the point where one time my car was in, I get a phone call from John. He says, I've got good news, bad news. And I go, what? He goes, what do you want? I said, give me the good news. He goes, car's fixed, ready to go. Not a big deal. Here's the price. Price was all in line. I said, so what's the bad news, John? He goes, we've lost your keys. I go, what do you mean you've lost my keys, John? You're in a garage. How do you lose my keys? He goes, we've stripped the place. We cannot find your keys. I didn't want to call you until we found them. We can't find them. What I'm going to do you have keys at home, Dan? Do you have access? Yes, I do. I'm going to send somebody to get you, take you home. You get into the house, get your keys. He'll bring you back. We'll pay for the keys to be replaced. I continued to refer John to people who needed a mechanic after that, because he went out of his way to make sure it was his mistake, or at least one of his mechanics, but he made it right. Make them look good. Advertise your ideal client. And again, this is going to fall to the UVP. This is, again, showing how important a UVP can be. This is your messaging, and it's going to be succinct. It's going to be in your language, but it's easy to let people know who it is you work for. And that way, they're not referring the wrong type of person, and you're not in that uncomfortable situation where you say, well, actually, I'm not going to be working with this, or I can't work with that, because that's not going to make you look good whatsoever. And then on an ongoing basis, you monitor and review what's happening with your referrals and your referability. So I've been teaching this conscious referable process for years. And it was only a few years ago, an advisor just said to me, Dan, you know what? This is a great process. I don't work to processes. I go, what do you mean? He goes, I work to programs. I don't work to processes. Can you build a program around this? And I thought, not long and hard, very quickly, I thought, what a great idea. Put down programs that advisors can follow, that they can fall right into. So we've done exactly that in all 4 methodologies of prospecting. We've created programs based on what other top advisors have been doing. So the first one we call every meeting, every call program. And the time frame is immediate. You can start doing this and it's ongoing and you never stop. So you review the referability process prior to every communication with a client or a prospect, looking at what it is that's going to make you more referable. And you also do the same thing prior to meeting with clients. And you can get very specific or you can be general on the whole process. Like, I need to do everything here. Or it could be, I just have to reiterate or introduce them to my unique value proposition. Or I need to inspire them more, or whatever it is. But focus. It takes 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes prior to every communication with a prospect or client or a meeting with either as well. So to make it really easy, we come up with some scripts. So your ideal client reminder, Mike and Ella, these are clients of mine. I'm saying the reason I work with young professionals like you is, so right off the bat, I'm telling them who my ideal client is, and it's a person like them. Or, Teresa, another client, I wanted to let you know the type of people that I work with, just in case anyone ever asks you for a referral to a financial advisor. And you'll notice you are not asking for a referral. You're setting yourself up to be referable, but you're not asking them for anyone. I've worked with entrepreneurs like you again. So now, Teresa, my ideal client is an entrepreneur like Teresa. I'm saying I want to work with people like you exclusively. And I've done so over the last 5 years because I'm able to do my best work with them. So you put this into your own words, you script it so it's comfortable, so it's natural, and it sounds natural to them. And that's how they're going to take it in. But they will understand that type of person, themselves, are your ideal client, not somebody else. In other words, they're not sharing you with somebody that's like nothing like them. Program 2, the Ultimate Client Communications Program. Again, you can start this immediately. You should be able to set this up within about 6 months. So you create a client communication process that keeps you top of mind and, importantly, referable. So again, the research suggests that most clients want to be contacted anywhere between 12 and 24 times a year in reality. Once a month should do it. So you say minimum once a month, I want my clients contacted. Right? And you can segment your clients, and we're going to talk about client segmentation. One thing is, the communications don't always need to be business. In fact, it's better if they're not 100% business. And in fact, a 1-to-1 business to non-business ratio is a good ratio. So the more you know about your clients, the more you know about their hobbies, their interests, the better. And the more you can segment them into these interests as your business gets larger, the better. One of the best programs I've ever seen, ever heard of, came from a great advisor, Mario Loretto. He told me this one several years ago. Mario had a large business at the time, and he must have told me this about 15 years ago, what he was doing. He had at that time 3 assistants. As I said, a large business, but his 10 by 10 is the program he lived with. So in other words, it was all about phoning 10 clients by 10 a.m. And for Mario, he was phoning his top clients, and he had segmented them in by letter category. He would take the A and B clients, and on a daily basis, he would call 10 by 10. And what Mario would suggest is he wasn't looking to actually get a hold of them. Very often, he would get their voicemail, and he'd just leave a message. Hi, it's Mario, just calling in to connect with you, see if there's any questions, if there's anything I can do for you. Boom, boom, boom. And that was it. Very quick, but he'd get 10 in. And he said he would even pre-program them into his phone so he could do it while driving to the office in the morning. But he'd get 10 by 10. At the same time, his 3 assistants were calling all the other clients. So he was calling his A and B, while the assistants were regularly calling the C and E clients. So he would recycle through his A and Bs many, many times over throughout the year. So his top tiers of clients heard from him many times. And here's what Mario pointed out. Many of them thought that they had seen him far more often face-to-face than they actually had because of these phone calls. And even when they didn't actually talk to him because he was just leaving a voice message, they thought that they had seen him more than he had even talked to them. The others were getting calls from the assistants, same message. Anything we can do? Any concerns? Do you need to meet with Mario? Do you need to talk to Mario? But Mario would contact those individuals at least once a year as well in between the meetings. So it was just a constant system of communications with the clients, and you can do this by email as well. So Terry's the client. I wanted to let you know that I've been keeping a watch on your asset allocation and for the time being. So you're saying you're not going to do anything, just hold the position. But, if you got any questions, you want to talk about anything, we can do it over a Zoom meeting. We can get that taken care of quickly. Or you split it into, right, the personal. Hi, Terry, I came across this website for online auctions and remembered that it was a hobby of yours. This has huge impact, especially with your top clients. Hope you find it useful. And then you throw in the business part. Please let me know if you'd like to have a Zoom review anytime over the next couple of weeks. Okay. The third program is the Discovery Rediscovery Future Introduction Program. In other words, I'm going to go through a discovery with a new client or prospect, or an existing client. I'm going to do a rediscovery, just update all the information, and it's going to create names that I'm going to ultimately ask to be introduced to sometime in the future. The one thing about introductions is we're going to see next time is that we don't ask to be introduced right away. We'll hold them in abeyance to another time. Our focus is on our clients, not on us wanting referrals or introductions. So again, you can set this up as a program where you say, okay, immediately I'm going to go see all of my clients. I'll break them down to what's appropriate and within a year I wanted to see, because this is the future growth of my business. Yes, I'm doing the right thing for them by doing a rediscovery, getting all their updated information. It's important, very important to do this either face-to-face, or you can do it through a Zoom or whatever virtual way, but you want to be able to talk directly with them, because this is how you're going to uncover the names. So you can use your own if you've got a personal financial goal worksheet, or you can go to our website and grab one there. But you're going to capture their top 3 financial goals. You're going to go, and we're going to work on this, the who, what, where, when, and why of financial goals. You're going to go through the top 3 goals. You're going to ask them questions about each goal until you run out of questions to ask. And in a lot of them, the questions, well, virtually every goal, it's going to be who is involved. Who. You're going to collect those names. You're going to write those names down. You're not going to ask to be introduced. You're going to hold those names in abeyance until the appropriate time, right? You go through the full fact finder discovery, or you could, again, go onto our website to get the family balance sheet, and you're going to update all of their information, and you're going to be able to collect a lot of who's, a lot of names within this. And I'm going to suggest easily 8 to 15 names within a family balance sheet you'll be able to, and we're going to show you exactly how you can get all of these names. Some of them may not apply to your ideal client profile, but a lot will. Finally, you're going to monitor and review everything you do about your referability program. You keep records. How do people respond? And you've got to have these in your files. Are they responding the way you want? Are you getting what you want? How are you responding to the conversations with them? How can you refine them? How can you make the language your own? If you're not comfortable in doing it, obviously you're not doing it the way you should be doing it. You can use the strengths journal that we talked about at our last session, to really emphasize what's going well or not. Remember, failure can be of value when you break it down, critique it, and learn from it. So don't be afraid to fail whatsoever. And you want to keep all the records of your incoming referrals and what happens. And importantly, you need a client feedback loop, and you need a referring client gratitude program, because as these people come through, the one thing we never do is share information. Obviously, I know you all know this. You've got to be careful because sometimes it can slip, but you don't share information about what you've done with these referrals. But even if you don't do business, you want to get back to the client that referred, or the center of influence who referred. I met with Jane. What a great person. We had a great conversation. Really appreciate you referring Jane to me. You don't have to say you did no business or you did do business, But a thank you is the number one thing. And whether or not you follow up with some form of a gift is even better. So that pretty much wraps it all up for this session. But obviously, there's a lot more to come. Next session, we're going to be looking at the ideal client profile, which if you follow through with this, and I got to tell you, this is what the best of the best do. It makes everything in your business easier. We're going to talk about debt management. Even if you don't deal with your client's debt, you need to bring this into your conversations and have somebody that can manage their debt, because it's going to fall into the 4 portfolios of wealth management. And since virtually all Canadians, including a huge percentage of retired Canadians, have debt, it is unbelievably important to them. And when you can show them how to manage their debt efficiently, where most financial advisors aren't, you're going to be loved. And then we're going to look at targeted introductions, targeted to your ideal client profile. So between now and our 4th session, your homework is to practice your referability scripts. Make them your own. You can take them from exactly what we've written here, but the likelihood is you're going to throw a nuance on the way you speak. First of all, who you speak about and who you speak to, who your ideal client is. Make it your own. Then you're going to memorize the asset management portfolio and, from last session, the tax planning. And I've got to ask you wholeheartedly, please do this. This is our number 1 concept piece, according to all feedback from our coaching clients, our individual as well as our group coaching clients. So using this concept piece, the 4 portfolios of wealth management, surpasses all other concepts we've ever worked with or the other advisors have worked with. So memorizing the tax planning and then memorizing the asset management, you should be able to draw both of them out before we get into the next session. So until that time, again, if there's any questions, just go to our website, or if you haven't connected with us on LinkedIn, please do. But until then, stay well, stay healthy, keep growing that business. We look forward to seeing you in our next session. Until then, take care. Bye-bye for now.